you for reminding me, Aisha. All right. There is another webinar that Dr. Zachary Walker will be delivering by next week. So I will be sharing the invite very soon, but that will be the last that he will be doing for us for this semester. So without further introduction, let's all welcome Professor Zachary Walker. If you can use your reactions and just clap your hands. I think I'm doing it right now. Welcome, Zachary. All right. Please.
Thank you. It's good to see all of you. It's nice to see some familiar faces now. This is, I think, the third in our series, and this one is going to be a little bit different. I think the others were maybe a bit more instructional. This one might be a bit more self-reflective, let's say. And again, as you can see, it's called 10 Questions for Educators. And when I say that, I think we're all educators, right? So whether you're potentially a student who's teaching in a class, whether you're one of our higher education faculty, these are some of the things that I speak with educators and in fairness, educational leaders about when I work with them. So again, it's a little bit different, and it's just simply 10 questions. You do not have to respond to any of the questions. They're more for you to think about. However, like all of our sessions, there will be a couple of chances for interaction. And if you don't interact, then I'll just stop talking for a while. So I hope that you will, and I trust that you will, because you all have been such a good audience these last couple. So let's go ahead and get started. Questions. So here is our first question. Are you acknowledging reality? And this seems like one of those questions is, what does that mean? And I think oftentimes if we think about the sector of education, right? If we think about being in classrooms, if you were to go, if you were to fall asleep in, I don't know, 1921, right? So 100 years ago, if you were to walk into a classroom and fall asleep and wake up today, the classroom structure itself would probably look pretty familiar to you. If you were to walk into a hospital, you might not know where you were. If you were to walk into a business place, you might not know where you were. But in some ways, the world has changed so much, and we have to really think about, are we actually acknowledging reality? So I always start with this because I think it's important to, again, acknowledge where we are. And if we look at technology, for example, and obviously the last year has changed how we think about technology, but this is from a group called We Are Social. You can go and you can find all the resources that you'd like there. But if you look at digital around the world, if you look on the left-hand side, that little red square there, about 7.85 billion people in the world. What I'd like us to look at is right next to it, the green one. 2/3 of the population has unique mobile users. And so what that means is when the word unique is that they have their own mobile device, okay? And so that means, and remember, we're talking the entire population. So we're talking babies, we're talking aunties and uncles, we're talking grandparents, 2/3, which doesn't seem that big until you consider the fact that we're including parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, in some areas, et cetera. And so, it's quite amazing that 2/3 of the people actually have their own device, right? If we look a little bit deeper into it, we can see that those numbers are continuing to grow. So by about 2% every year, we're continuing to grow. This year, from January of last year till January of this year, it was 93 more million people had unique devices, right? And then if you look at the essentials, and I think this is quite interesting around the world, again, our total population, quite close, a few more males than females. Annual change, we're growing by about 1%. But that last one on the right-hand side, look at the median age, 31, right? It's quite young. We've got lots of young people out there. And so if you think that that's the median age, look below that, how many of this population are still in schools? And what are we actually preparing them for, right? So let's look a little bit closer at where you are. So again, population essentials here, about 10 million people in the UAE, lots more males than females. Median age is a little bit higher, 32.6 over there on the right-hand side. If we look down the bottom row on the right-hand side, we look at male literacy, female literacy, and overall literacy. So a fairly literate country, right? But I want you to look at the next one because I think this is quite interesting. Let's look right here at mobile connections, 171.6%. How is that even possible? It's because many of you have more than one device, right? Some of you may have a personal and a professional device, or you have multiple devices that you use daily. And whereas oftentimes the one place that we don't see devices, it's when we walk into schools, right? And so it would be almost like if we just started ignoring the fact that there are pencils in the world. And we said, okay, outside everyone can use a pencil, but in here, no, we don't use pencils. So we want to think about how we use technology. And part of that is just acknowledging the reality that technology is everywhere, right? And if you look at the daily time spent on media, this is again, in the UAE, 7 hours and 24 minutes a day spent on the internet and on devices. 8 hours a day spent on devices. And that's not including, again, that's not including your work time necessarily. Most of this is your personal time. Time spending watching television, 3 hours. Time spent using social media, almost 3 hours. Time spent reading press, the media, almost 2 hours. Most of our lives are built around our devices now. They're built around our devices. And yet again, we go into schools and we're not teaching kids how to use them appropriately and responsibly. And then when they do make mistakes, we often get mad at them and we act like, oh, I can't believe they did that. Well, we've never taught them how to use devices appropriately and responsibly, right? And if you think about your own 15, 16, 17-year-old self, you think about some of the decisions you made at that point in your life, everyone except for Myra, she's always been an angel. But oftentimes, and this is obviously, this goes into the neuroscience side of it, we know that people make bad decisions, right? Especially kids. And they especially make bad decisions when they're things that are forbidden to them. So we forbid devices, and then we try to get mad at them when they use them when we've never taught them the appropriate and responsible use. So again, part of this is just acknowledging the reality that we are very, very tech driven. And to look at this a little bit forward, this is 2014. By the age of 3 to 5, 66% of children are able to play a computer game. 50% by the age of 3 to 5 can navigate a smartphone. Only 14% can tie their shoes, and only 23% can swim unaided. And again, look at the developmental milestones. I'm not saying that they're changing, but there's definitely things that are being added on to how kids develop. So let's play a game real quick. Get those fingers ready. All right, I hope everybody's ready to type these in because you're going to type these in the chat box. I'm going to put up an icon. As soon as you know what that icon represents, I want you to type it in the chat box. All right, is everybody good with that? Now, if I only get like 1 or 2 responses, we're not going to play this game for very long. So I want everyone to play. All right, so here is your first one. This is really easy. Okay, just tell what you think this might be. Okay, type it in the chat box. What is that thing? Quick. Be quick. All right. Good. What's this next one? What's that? I see Myra got it right. Everyone else is a little slower now. A paperclip. Good. No, it's not a paperclip. Yes, thank you. This is Airbnb, right? So this is an industry, obviously, that's massive now around the world. How about this next one? What is this? Oh, sorry. What is this? Let's see if anyone knows this one. Yes, good. The whole College of Education, whoever's running that account, well done. Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin. How about this one? Let's see if anyone knows what that one is. Yeah, Snapchat. Good. How about this one? Yep. Last couple here. And by the way, I know who's on this list. I know a couple of you aren't playing. Don't make me come over there. Ready? Here we go. What's that? Now this one may be a little bit harder depending on where you are in the world, because I know we do have some other visitors from around the world. Yes, it's Uber, the car sharing service. You may have heard of it, even if you don't know the icon, which is fine. What's that thing? What's that right there? Anyone? Yep, it's a Kindle. And last one, what is that? What's that stand for? It is a robot. What does it stand? College of Education, yes, Android. Android, it's the Android symbol. So now here's the question. This is what I'd also like to put this in the chat. What do all these have in common? What do all these things have in common? You can take a look at them. They could be apps, perhaps, yep. Kindle and phones aren't, but other than that, they are apps. You're able to recognize them. Yep, good. So they're recognizable. We know that. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We all recognize all these icons. We've heard of these companies, even if maybe they're not, I know that Uber isn't active in the UAE, but you've heard of them, right? We all have access to any of them, and none of these existed 15 years ago. So all these are, which are pretty dominant brands around the world. They're pretty dominant things that we all are aware of, did not exist 15 years ago. And again, this goes back to this point that things are changing, and we have to acknowledge that so many of these things that are now, we can access them from our devices if they're not devices themselves. We go to Bitcoin, we can change our bank statements. We go to Airbnb, we can book holidays. We go to Uber or the particular service that's where you are, and you can get transportation anywhere. You can send messages to each other around the world for free as long as you have the internet. You can send messages that actually disappear using Snapchat within a set amount of time. All these things exist, and none of them existed 15 years ago. And I think sometimes we forget that for our students, they've just always known these. That they've never lived in a world without these, and we have to acknowledge that. So in one word, when we talk about reality, one word, how would you describe everything that we just talked about? From the statistics to the icons, you get one word. Don't try to cheat, one word. How would you describe everything that we just talked about when it comes to reality? A lot of it's technology, yep. Brands building, development. Hyperactive perhaps, yep. Things are changing. It's virtual, good, good. So yeah, it could be transformational, good. Here's the word that I like to use. Again, reality. It's not good or bad. Oftentimes we judge it as good or bad, right? But it's actually just reality. And this is funny because this is from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He talks about rules to technology. Anything that was there when you were born is just normal, right? If it was there when you were born, it's a normal, natural part of the world. Anything that is invented between the time you're 18 to 35 is new and exciting. But once you get past 35, anything that's invited, it's against the natural order. It shouldn't be that way, right? And so again, when we think about, are we acknowledging reality? We have to acknowledge the fact that our world is very different, especially if we're over 35, right? The world is very, very different for our students. And so what we can't necessarily do is judge the world based on our perception. When we're teaching, we have to be able to see the world through our students' perceptions. We have to recognize that they would have probably known all of those brands quite quickly, especially if they're localized, and they've probably used most of those icons, right? So again, it can be overwhelming. I absolutely agree with you. That's why we don't want to take on too much, but we can't think it's negative. It's not positive or negative. It's just reality. And the quicker that we acknowledge that, the better that we're able to actually work with it. So, second question, what's your yes, but? Anyone know this guy, Dan Rusgaard? Does anyone know what that thing in the middle is? If you know what that thing in the middle is, put it in the chat box. I'll give you just a second. Dan Rusgaard is a architect He is an architect from Holland. And so he's Dutch. And this is actually, what this actually is this, you can see up top where it's bent a little bit. This actually pulls in pollution, compresses it down, and what it creates is jewelry. So these are all over China, especially. They're starting to pull them and put them in parks and other places. It actually takes in pollution, polluted air, takes the carbon down into these small little things and creates, you can create jewelry, you can create lots of things out of it. Now, he's had all these kinds of crazy ideas. And when he was in school, he had these ideas. And what do you think his teacher said to him? Yeah, but that's too expensive. Yeah, but that's not going to work. Yeah, but that's not the way things work. We're not going to be able to do that. As educators, we constantly have to be thinking about, what is our yes, but? We always want our students to be able to think and to be able to create, but oftentimes when they come to us, the things that we're not used to, we say, yeah, but, and we give them every reason that that can't exist. Now, what do they hear? When we say yes, but, what do they hear? They hear no, right? Don Rusgaard also built this. Does anyone know what this is? Anyone recognize the pattern? Van Gogh's Starry Night, the famous painting. These are actually bike paths. So instead of having lights by bike paths, these are solar powered bike paths so that people can still ride their bikes at night, and yet you don't have to put in these lamps all along. So you get this natural light so you can ride on the starry bike path and look up and see the stars. Another one of his ideas that when he brought it up, people said, yeah, but that probably won't work because you're not going to have city planning. Yeah, but that seems like really a lot of money and it doesn't seem like it would be worth it. Yeah, but what are we going to do with the lamps that are already there, right? So again, what is your yes, but? And this goes to so much to do with our outlook. You know, pessimism is a misuse of your imagination. It's one of my favorite quotes. Of all the things that we can imagine, why would we imagine the but, right? Josh Weisgrau says, you cannot mandate innovation. You can only invent it or prevent it by the conditions you create. So are you creating conditions in your class that allow innovation? We can't say to our students, oh, be smarter, or oh, be more creative, or oh, be more innovative. But what we can do is allow them to come up with just things that are really crazy and maybe to us seem like there's no chance. But what we have to do is we have to turn that yes, but into a yes, and. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And how would you get funding for that? Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And how do you think that everyone could benefit from that kind of thing? Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Now, what we need to think about are some of these other things that we have going on. We have to think about every stakeholder here. I really like that idea, though. You see what I mean? How do you change yes, but, which they hear no, into yes, and? Next question. Augmented reality came up, right? And I don't know if you all remember Pokemon Go. I'm not sure if it was real big there, but I had written a paper with one of my colleagues on augmented reality and virtual reality in education. Now, we wrote this paper in about 2014, and nobody would accept it. Nobody would take it on until Pokemon Go came out. And then everybody kind of understood what augmented reality was, right? And it was like, we got it published within like 2 months after Pokemon Go came out, because then people could see augmented reality. Now we know we've got augmented reality shirts that people use for science class. So there's science teachers that wear this shirt, and when you use your device over the top of it, it opens it up so you can actually see into cardiovascular systems or things like that. We've got all kinds of things that we can actually use now. Before, everyone was yes, but that will never hit education. And now it's turned into yes, and we could use that for this. Has anyone see these? It's the glove hand. It's an actual, you just, instead of carrying a phone around, you just wear a glove and you can just turn and talk to it when you get rings, right? Sign language gloves that when you sign it, there's a voice that speaks it. So for someone who doesn't know sign language, you can still communicate. So all these kinds of things are yes ands, right? They're all yes ands. We've even got, for those of you who like selfies, and by the way, for our Filipino and Filipino guests, they are the #1 place in the world for selfies. We've even got these kinds of brushes that you can just, act like you're combing your hair, but have the phone's spaces for the phones that actually go in there so you can take your selfie. Or if you are into it, these types of heels that you can wear with wide toes so you can put your phone in there and just take a nice little selfie from time to time. So again, all these though are not yes, but answers, right? They're yes, and we have to change our mentality as educators. So here's a question for you. What are you learning that's new? What are you reading? And don't just say you're reading the research article about your field of expertise. What are you reading outside of your field? There's a great book by David Epstein right now called Range. And what he talks about is that the next generation of leaders are going to be people who know lots of things outside of their field. And so I know in academia and as teachers, we think, okay, I just got to know this and I've got to know this really well. But we have to model learning. We have to model how challenging learning can be for our students, right? And so what are you reading? I don't know if you've heard of Julius Yego. Anyone heard of him from Kenya? So in Kenya, when we think about Kenya, what is it that we think about as far as athletics go? When we think about Kenya, what would we say they're known for athletically? Marathon running, right? If you think about the Olympic athletes, they're always great runners and they always win many, many medals. He was a big guy. He's like, I can't run, but I want to be in the Olympics. So he literally taught himself to throw the pole vault by watching YouTube videos. And he did so well that he actually made it to the Olympics and represented Kenya, all through watching YouTube videos. Again, we can learn anything we want. I'm sorry, you're right, javelin. I'm so sorry, Giorgio. Thank you for that. It's the javelin. We can learn anything we want, but we have to make an effort to learn, right? And this is a really important point when we think about this. Is nothing to do with age, right? I love Masako Wakamiya, who's a Japanese coder. She took up the piano at 75. She taught herself to code. She creates dedicated apps for the elderly. And one of the things that she says is, I'm so busy every day, I don't have any time to have diseases, right? So this is not about age. We're never too old to continue learning. And what we have to remember in schools is that students can't be the only ones learning. We have to be the ones learning too. And outside of our field, because that will help us relate to them. It helps us model for them. It's all those really important things. So next question, are you allowing genius in your school, in your classroom, in your university? Remember, genius doesn't fit on a rubric. And this sounds quite simple, but I like this rubric. This is a rubric that I use for my classes. If you see there on the left, whatever the criteria is, and then you've got this idea of they haven't passed yet. And as you move farther to the right, B, if you would get a B in class, that's you've shown a pretty thorough understanding. But look at A. To get an A in this class, you have to take a chance. You have to really wow me to get an A. Because B is good, but B is not necessarily innovative. It's not necessarily different, right? To really do something crazy, you have to take a chance and wow me. And so again, when we do that, what does that start to create? Again, it's creating conditions for genius. It's creating conditions for innovation. It's creating conditions for creativity. And those are so, so important. Eden Full, anyone know what that thing on the top is there? Can anyone see that? Tell me what they think that is. What's the black thing? That's actually a solar panel. But if you think about solar panels, the way solar panels are set up right now, if there's a solar panel like this, the only way this is going to gather sun is if I'm over here, right? If the sun's over here. But the sun rotates, or the earth rotates. So once the sun's over here, what happens? I'm not having any more solar energy. She recognized this, and she had traveled. She had had a chance to travel a little bit through other parts of the world, and she realized how important energy was, and especially in some of our impoverished areas. So she created this where if you look at the top, you see those two water bottles hanging down? When the sun shines on one side, what happens to the water? It dissipates. The other side pulls it down. So you've got this, and then the other side pulls it down because the weight's over here now. And so as the sun moves throughout the entire day, the sun can have twice the energy. These solar panels can create twice the energy. She created this when she was 16 years old, not in school though, outside of school, because she got yes buts from teachers in school. Emma Yang created this app Timeless for her grandmother who has dementia. One of the things about dementia is that oftentimes people will call someone 3 or 4 or 5 times and tell them the same thing because they forgot that they had just called them. So this app actually, if you call again within 5 minutes, it will say, are you sure you want to make this call? Emma Yang was 12 years old, created this for her grandmother, but not in school because she got yes buts in school, right? JewelBots, this is a coding app created by young girls who love jewelry. So it looks like jewelry, but what it does is you have to code to find each other. So it's a game you can play in a public place. So you can play hide and seek in a place and go hide, but in order to find each other, because it's on the jewelry, you have to code, you have to figure out the right code to find where the other people are. Again, all these things were created by young women, but they weren't created in school. They were created outside of school because schools are so structural and they wouldn't allow them the creativity for it. Instead of asking kids what they want to be when they grow up, we should ask them what problems they want to solve. This changes the conversation from who do I want to work for to what do I need to learn to be able to do that. Big difference, right? Big, big difference. Again, think about that rubric. How could you adopt something like that? Right? Next question. What do you know about the brain? This is something that's really important to me in our department. And part of my personal interest is neuroscience and how the brain works and how we learn. So I am going to very quickly go through 12 rules about the brain. So first of all, if we start on the right-hand side, we know that our pedagogy has to be relevant to students. We know it has to be a bit challenging because if it's not challenging, they'll lose interest. If it's too challenging, right? If it's too challenging, they might give up. If it's not challenging enough, they'll lose interest. So it has to have some rigor. We know that a lot of education is built on relationships. A lot of life is built on relationships. And then these last 3, we just know what's good for the brain. Sleep matters a lot. Diet matters a lot. Reading matters a lot, right? Exercise matters a lot. And so those things, when anyone comes to me, when my graduate students come to me and say, oh, I'm really struggling, I'm saying, well, are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising? Are you eating right? Let's start there. And then we can go other places. But when we think about the brain specifically, we know, right, that again, movement and exercise are really important. So getting out, walking, moving, that makes a big difference on your productivity and your efficiency. You've got to be exercising. We know that social things are important in class. So let's take these first 2 things. What's the first thing we often tell students when they walk into our class? Sit down and be quiet. Those are oftentimes the first 2 things we tell our students: sit down and be quiet. Worst 2 things for the brain. Worst 2 things for the brain. Our students need to be moving, they need to be talking, they need to be sharing. And there's lots of practical ways you can do that. That's another seminar, which I'm happy to maybe provide at some point. But you've got to be thinking about how much are your students moving in classes? How much are they being social in classes? Music matters. Music is really good for the brain. Again, I'm not going to go into the neuroscience and all this stuff, but it matters. Can you play music in class? Can you give music when you're waiting to do a Zoom call? How can you incorporate music into your classes? Laughter matters. One of the things that I always like to say is that, you know, when you think about learning, the ha-ha leads to the aha. The more that people are laughing, the more open that their receptors are to learning. So we've got to make sure that we're having fun, that we're showing some humor. Novelty matters. Again, there's a time and a place for patterns, and we know that that matters, but doing things the same way every time gets boring for everyone, right? If it's boring to you as an instructor, it's certainly boring to them. And if it's not boring to you, then you've got to figure out how to translate that to them as students. And then again, multimodal, we know that learning styles are not true. It's not a real thing. And so what we do know though, is that the more styles, the more modes that you address, it's important. So for example, you want visuals, you want audio, you want things that people can touch, you want things that they can potentially smell if it relates to your lesson. All those things really matter. And again, as educators moving forward, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, what do you know about the brain? How are you incorporating what we know about the brain into learning? And I'll give you a quick example, okay? Because oftentimes people say, oh, well, that's just above me. You would never go to a doctor that hadn't studied the body. You would never go to a doctor who said, yeah, well, I know about people and I've walked a little bit, so I know how the legs work. But we go into classrooms all the time and people haven't studied the teaching. They haven't studied the brain and what impact that has. So we've got to start learning about the brain, right? Now, the next question can be a little bit challenging. So again, I just want you to think about this yourself. And by the way, just through some of our conversations, I think I know the answer to some of this, but I really want you to think about yourself here because this question can be challenging. Would you want to work with you? What kind of colleague are you? You all know it when you walk down the corridor, you walk down the hall, the teacher who's always negative. Ugh. Starting the week again. Oh, I'm so tired. Ugh, it's so hot. Ugh, I got so much marking to do. What does that bring? Are you that colleague? Because here's the thing, if you're not excited to be there, your students aren't going to be. If you're not excited to be there, your colleagues aren't going to be. Who are you? What do you bring to the table? Would you want to work with you? And here, remember, this is a decision. This is an active decision you can make every day to smile a little bit more, to not make that negative comment, to be positive. You know, one of the things I always say is Monday's the best day of the week. It might be Sunday in your case. You got 5 straight days to impact students' lives. You got 5 straight days to change lives. That's pretty exciting, right? Would you want to work with you? And again, I know it's fine. I see that there's some jokes and we're laughing a little bit and all that's great, right? It really is great. But I hope you'll think about this because this is an important question. It's a really important question. I think about Principal McCoy. He is a principal who was in the US, he was a principal of the year about 2 years ago. He walks around the halls and just takes selfies with students. He'll walk into classes and just photobomb them. He's photobombing all the time. But again, what kind of energy does that bring, right? Like principals who are supposed to be like gruff and like, you know, being tough on kids, and you got, you know, the person you might be scared of. He's sitting around walking around taking photos, and students come up to him because they want to be in one of his photos, right? You have to be what you want to see. If you want to see kids who are excited about learning, you got to be excited about teaching. If you want to see kids who are excited to come into your class, you got to be excited to be there. It's quite simple, really, but you have a lot of control over that, and we can control that. I like this little phrase about happiness. I'll just show it to you. You can take a look at it. Where'd you find that? I've been searching for it everywhere. I created it myself. And that's what it is, right? We create our own conditions. And remember, you can't always have a good day, but you can face a bad day with a good attitude. That's not saying that everything's always going to be perfect. We know that it's not, right? But what kind of energy are we giving off, right? So here's the next question. Would you want to learn from you? If you were 8 years old or 12 years old or 17 years old, would you want to be in your class? Go back to the 8-year-old you. Would you want to be there? The 18-year-old you, would you want to be there, right? I'm going to show you a video real quick, and I'll tell you a little story about this video before I show it. So this is probably about 9 or 10 years ago. I was given seminars on technology and how to best use technology in class. And this woman who was in her mid 60s at the time came up to me and said, after the seminar, it was a day-long session, face-to-face, live professional development. She came up to me and she said, I don't know anything about technology. She said, but I know that I have to try something. I teach middle school, so like 13 and 14-year-old math. And she's in her mid 60s. And she said, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my iPad and I'm just going to try to make a video based on some of the stuff you said today. Would that be okay? And I said, sure. And she said, can I email you and just check to see what you think? I said, no problem. That'd be great. About 3 weeks later, I get this video.
If the last number's even, then a 2 will do, making this easy for me and you. If the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, you have a 2 and 3, then a 6 will be. If the last 2 digits are divisible by 4, you got your game on and you'll have a high score. If the last number is a 0 or 5, get that 5 in and do a hand jive. If the sum of the digits is divisible by 9, you get that guy in and you'll have a fine time. If the last number's 0, then a 10 will do. Divisibility rules, rap is through.
Now she sent this to me, right? And this woman's name is Marianne Kaiser. And she said, should I show it to my class? And I said, absolutely yes, right? But you can see literally all she did was she put her iPad up on like the counter at her house. You can see her kitchen table in the background. And she made up this rap. And she thought, that's one small way that I can use technology where I feel a little bit comfortable. Not completely comfortable, because she wasn't even really sure how to do it yet. But she's like, I'm going to try it, right? So again, how do you think this went over with their students? They loved it. 13 and 14-year-olds learning math. She had kids from other classes come in and ask her for her autograph, right? So they kept saying, you know, when's the next video? When's the next rap video? When's it coming out? And she said, I'm not making any more rap videos. You all are going to make rap videos about math. So then every year now it's a competition. All the students have to choose one topic that they love in math and make a video about it. And if you think about all the things they have to learn, not only do they have to learn the technology, they have to write a script, they have to understand the content well enough to make it make sense. And it's become this massive competition where kids are trying to get into her middle school math class just because they know that she's willing to try things. Again, are you willing to try things? Are you willing to be silly for your class, right? I witnessed a teacher tell their class today, I'm nervous about this lesson. I've never done anything like this before. I love that, right? Are you willing to go outside what's your comfort zone? Remember, success is not a straight line. Being really, really good requires lots of mistakes along the way. And again, don't look at them as mistakes, look at them as learning. You know, it's that whole, you win some and you learn some, right? And you have to think about to yourself, would you want to learn from you, especially having this thing right here where everything else is a student that I can access, my friends, the media, videos, I can access everything else. If you want me to look at you, you got to be good. You got to be engaging. Would you want to learn from you? Well, one person hesitates because he feels inferior. Another is busy making mistakes and becoming superior. This is the kind of stuff we'll say to our students, but we sometimes don't engage in ourselves, right? We've got to be willing to try new things, do new things, throw ourselves out there. And sometimes it's not going to work. And here's the cool thing about this, and I hope y'all will really, really hear me on this, because this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to say today. We can talk all about grit and resilience and all growth mindset, all those things, right? If we're not willing to do it ourselves, we can't expect our students to be willing to do it. And part of what happens when we try things and it doesn't go well, the most exciting thing we can do is say, well, you know what, that didn't work. Let's try something different tomorrow. Or, you know what, that didn't work at all. George, do you have an idea of how we could do that differently? Or Myra, you know, I know you have a different piece of technology. Could you show me how to do that? See what I mean? We have a chance to model resilience and persistence and growth mindset and grit and all those things we say we want in our students. If we're willing to make mistakes and just acknowledge that that didn't work well, that's showing them how we can do it. right? So again, I'm going to ask here, would you rather have an average teacher who plays it safe or an amazing teacher who fails sometimes? Put your answer in the chat box. Would you rather have an average teacher who plays it safe or an amazing teacher who fails sometimes? Yes, some of you, there we go. Yeah, I think we'd all rather have the amazing teacher, right? So which one are you? Which one are you? Are you the one who plays it safe, or are you the one who's willing to fail sometimes, right? I think it's really important to ask ourselves that. Okay, just a couple more questions here. Are you making decisions based on the 5%? Now, who are the 5%? Any group of people, 5% of the group is just crazy, right? And they are going to, you know what, one of you is crazy. 1 to 2 you is just, no matter what happens, you're going to be negative and you're not going to like it and all that kind of stuff. But what do we do as teachers? We often look at those 1 or 2 students who are misbehaving, or we look at that little group that are saying bad things and we overreact to them, right? We spend all of our time on that 5%. And what happens then is there's 95% of our kids who actually want, right? And they want to try and they want to do well. But we end up spending all of our time on the 5%. One of the things I always say, stop pulling donkeys. That 5% is going to be that 5%. Let them just be negative. Let them be unimpressed. You focus on the 95%, right? Now, some of you, I know we have a couple of Filipino colleagues here today. You might remember Brother Armin Luistro, who was the Secretary of Education for the Philippines. I met with him a few years ago, and we were talking, and I asked him how he was trying to make change across the country. And one of the things he said is, he said, I just start with the great teachers. He said, I give them everything they need to succeed. He said, I don't worry about those who aren't great. I don't worry about the people who are the troublemakers. I start with the great teachers. And I'm going to give them everything I possibly can, whether that's time or resources or money or space. If I can support the really great ones, everyone else will rise, right? And we have to remember that as teachers, right? Start with the great teachers. Start with the great students. Give them the attention that they deserve. Stop spending our time on the 5%. Okay, who sits at your table? So let's say that you have a really important decision to make professionally, and it's a big one for you. Maybe it's how you're going to handle a certain lesson, or it's a student, or maybe it's, I'm trying to figure out if I should take this job, or do I want that role as a head of the, whatever it might be. Who are you going to invite over to dinner? If you could have 6 people to come over, 5 people plus you. So if you have a table for 6, who's going to sit around that table? There should be 5 different types of people who sit at your table, and they should be very distinctive. Now, you might have 20, 30 people that you think, okay, these are people I'd go to, but you always want to make sure these 5 are sitting there. Number 1, someone who's older and wiser than you. This is someone who might have been through that decision before, has a different perspective, has been experienced in this particular thing. Number 2, someone you're mentoring. You also want someone younger than you, because they're sometimes going to ask you the questions that you've forgotten about, right? They're going to ask you the questions, go, oh, I hadn't really thought about that, right? So you need to be mentoring as well, right? Third person, someone who's your hero. Now, you may not know them, okay? It could be Oprah. It could be, one of the princes. It could be, but it's someone like you. You want to sit there and think, if they were sitting at your table, what would they say about this? If they were here right now, what would be their input, right? Number 4, someone you're close to emotionally who doesn't care at all about the professional decision. Someone who's going to say, you know what, Myra, I like you a lot and I know who you are, and the position sounds great, but that's not who you are. Yeah, the money's great, the responsibility's great, the title's great, but are you actually going to be happy there? You know what, that lesson sounds really good, but are you sure that that's something you can pull off? Are you going to be comfortable in that space? So again, someone who's close to you emotionally, who can kind of check you outside of the professional. And then the last one, someone from a very different culture. So that could be, if you're from the East, they're from the West, or, it could be a different faith. It could be a different sexual orientation. It could be any of those number of things. But these 5 people need to be sitting at your table when you make wise decisions. Again, I have a list in my office of about 20 to 25 people that I can go to at any point to get their opinion. Any decision that I make, based on what the decision is, I will find people that fit these criteria. That has been instrumental to help me, but it's also, as educators and as teachers, we can't expect to do it all alone. It's a hard job, right? So we've got to be willing to ask and get different ideas and get opinions, especially from sometimes people who are younger, our mentors, or people who don't care about us, our mentees, right? There's lots of ways that we can work this, but we need to have those people sitting at our table. Next thing to think about here is, as we conclude, here's your 10 questions. I'm going to give you 1 minute to look through these. All right. So are you acknowledging reality? What's your yes, but? How can your yes, but become your yes, and? What are you learning that's new? Are you allowing genius in your school, in your classroom, in your university? What do you know about the brain? Would you want to work with you? Would you want to learn from you? Are you making decisions based on the 5%? And who sits at your table? So those are the 10 questions. I would like everybody here to pick one of them that has stuck out to them the most today. You've got 1 minute to put it in the chat. Which question stuck out to you? You can tell why or not. That's up to you. Which of the questions really stuck out to you? We're going to take a full minute here. So you've got time. Don't rush it. Look through those questions. What's one that for you was like, you know what, I really need to think about this, or I need to do that better, or yeah, I need to make sure that my teachers understand that, whatever it might be. So 1 minute, I'm going to put you on the timer, and we will continue in 1 minute, but I'd love to hear what stuck out to you. Yeah, I didn't include, I'm sorry, I didn't include the making decisions based on 5% on this slide. I apologize, but yeah, that's one of them as well. 20 seconds. Ten seconds. Okay, so again, these are questions. I actually have about 25 questions that I go back to all the time, and they're mostly as a self-check, right? So that's all this is meant for today. It's not like we're gonna hold you accountable or obviously any of that stuff. It's more just for you to constantly be thinking, what is it that I need to be making sure? I actually have these and my other ones printed out and actually posted in my office. And they're right by my door. So every time I leave the office or come into the office, I'm looking at them. And that doesn't mean that I'm always focusing on them, but they're always there. And it's really important, I think, as we think about these kinds of things, as we think about professionals, it's easy to just kind of get in this habit of doing things the same way, or getting negative when not paying attention, or starting to make decisions by ourselves, or whatever it may be. It's really important that we have questions to come back to, right? So we have about 10 minutes left. I understand that you're probably tired and exhausted, especially if you're celebrating Ramadan. So I don't want to have to keep you the whole time, but I would love if we were to have a conversation, or if you would share some of your favorite questions, perhaps, that you ask yourself. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a second. And if you feel comfortable, I would love to see your beautiful, beautiful, beautiful faces, and we can chat for a second. So yes, anybody have anything they want to share or would like to feedback?
Yeah. Before I open it up for discussion, thank you so much, Dr. Zachary, for another inspiring, another energizing talk. I think more than anything, Zachary just makes us excited once again to be joy bringers and music makers in our classroom environment as teachers. So that being said, yes, please feel free to just jump in. Yes, Dr. Georges. Yeah.
All right. So one thing I'd like to share is you mentioned that who sits at your table in a very positive way, which is great.
Mhm.
But both my wife and I are educators, and we also consider the negative people sitting at our table so we can see the negative side of things and use it and make it a positive.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? Like you might want to, so in the business world, they have sometimes that counterintelligence kind of person, right? The person who's always supposed to be thinking on the opposite side. And that's a really good point. Maybe someone that you invite to your table is someone who's always going to see the negative or always going to think, in a way that's contrarian to you. Because one of the things I often say is if you think about your table and you look around the table and everyone looks just like you don't have the right table. Right? You've got to have people who think differently, who are going to challenge you differently, who are going to, that table's not supposed to be a nice meal with validation, right? That table is supposed to be the place, like you were just saying, that is going to think differently so you turn it into a positive. That's a really good point. So thank you for bringing that up. Really good.
Thank you. And now you know what my first job used to be. Counterintelligence.
Right? Yeah. So good organizations have them, and they actively have them. So yeah, it's great. Other people.
I think I can just say that the 10 questions are really legitimate, and if I try to think about my own classrooms, I pick on those questions, and sometimes I talk to my students about those questions, but I never thought about them for myself or go through self-reflection, right? So always I tell my students, you need to do that. Be sure when you are teaching your students, you are looking for the genius. You are considering this and that, but do I do it? I'm not sure.
No,
I think that's really great to start to go through this self-reflection.
And thank you for saying that, Hala, because again, I think that you're on the right track, right? Because you're starting to look inward instead of outward. And this is one thing that we often do as teachers is we just think, oh, well, we can just distribute knowledge and it's going to be beautiful if they just follow what we say. With us ourselves, we're not following what we say. And so I'm being very serious. I have those questions printed out on my wall that say, things like, what is your yes, but? Like, it's literally speaking to me, like, what do I have to be really careful of that I'm not doing the yes, but thing? So thank you for saying that, Hala, because it is easy to just, distribute the knowledge, but not take the knowledge ourselves.
If I may, again, I would like to thank you. That was another inspiring session. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And there are many points. I mean, I'm excited with all the questions that you have raised, but I would like to stay a little bit on this nice book of David Epstein, who is related to one of your questions.
Yes.
To many, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, as teachers, we should be specialists as well as generalists at the same time. I mean, and you raised this point at certain points, like what are we learning? So it is very crucial, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That we remain relevant for the students. That's one point. Are we relevant to our students or outdated to our students? Can we come closer to the way they are thinking? So we need to become more generalist, probably, and we need to, at some stage, ignore how old we are. What do you think? I mean, in order to try to understand the students.
Yeah, I think, it's that old saying, right? Age is nothing but a number, right? It's really about the mental age and how we approach things. But I think that, this idea of very specific knowledge is really, really important. And I think all of us are scholars for a specific reason. But what sometimes we do is we get so focused on that that we act like there's not a whole other world out there. And the more that we learn outside of our comfort zone, the more that we can bring those little things into class, and we can make analogies and we can give examples. And that's where it gets quite exciting. I think I personally am more of a generalist myself, but I understand. So for me, the challenge is really going deep into my content because I like being a generalist. For others, you might be really into your content. It might be harder to be a generalist. But just understand that we can't be one and not the other. To be the best teacher we can be is really important. So I think you're absolutely right. And thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. I think for our last comment, Dr. Ali, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Zakaria. Yes, I like your 10 questions. I have in front of me my own reminder on my notice board, like you. I have the comfort zone and the fear zone, the learning zone, and the final one is the growth zone. So all the time I remind myself that if you want to grow really, you need to go beyond your comfort zone and jump over your fear zone. You learn and go even beyond learning so that you really grow. So I have it here. You can see that.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's good. Yeah,
So-
I've seen that before, and I think it's really valuable. Because again, we all have, one of my other questions is that I ask sometimes is, what's your blind spot? You know, and I think we can all have blind spots that we start to ignore, we start to just not see because we're not focused, and that kind of thing keeps you focused on, you know, growth and learning and comfort and all those things. So Myra, thank you so much for having me. I know I'm on a panel next time, I think. And so I'm sure you're probably more than tired of hearing from me. So thankfully we'll have some other great voices there as well. But lovely to see you all. Thank you for those who are willing to turn your cameras on. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zachary. And see you again next week, same time, 3 to 4:30. So please join us again. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.